Next chapter, ecology. Now, when you look at this tree, you may think it is growing independently. However, the truth is that no living organism, including this tree, can live in isolation. Every organism is surrounded by a host of living and non-living components of the environment with which it continuously interacts. For instance, this tree is influenced by a number of abiotic components such as temperature, water, light, soil, wind, and others. On the other hand, different biotic components such as pathogens, parasites, predators, and competitors of this tree also play an important role in its survival. And just like plants, animals are also continuously interacting with the abiotic and biotic components of the environment. The study of an organism and its environment is called ecology. In other words, ecology studies the relationships amongst organisms and between organisms and the abiotic environment. When the study involves a single species, it is called autecology. If it involves more than one species, it is called synecology. In Form 1, we said that the part of the earth and the atmosphere inhabited by living organisms is called a biosphere or ecosphere. An ecosystem is a functional and stable system where living organisms interact amongst themselves and with the surrounding physical environment, leading to a flow of energy and nutrients. A log or a forest, a pond, or the ocean are just some of the ecosystems found in nature. Ecosystems are classified as either natural or artificial. Natural ecosystems exist naturally in nature and function all by themselves. They are further classified as terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Forests, deserts, and grasslands are some terrestrial ecosystems, while oceans, lakes, and wetlands are aquatic ecosystems. Artificial ecosystems are created and maintained by humans. They include croplands, orchards, gardens, and aquariums. A habitat is a specific locality where an organism lives. It may be terrestrial or aquatic. An ecological niche is the specific place where an organism lives and its role in that habitat. For instance, plants are usually primary producers whenever they are. A community refers to all organisms belonging to different species in the same habitat. Population refers to all members of a particular species in a given habitat. Next, we look at factors in an ecosystem. Factors in an ecosystem are classified as abiotic or non-living and biotic or living factors. Abiotic factors include light, temperature, soil, humidity, wind, and others. The sun is the main source of light. Photosynthetic organisms like plants depend on light energy for photosynthesis to make their own food. The duration quality and intensity of light determines the distribution of plants. Plants growing in dark, shaded areas can photosynthesize under low light intensity. In animals, light influences migration and hibernation. All biochemical processes in living organisms are driven by enzymes, and enzymes have an optimum temperature at which they operate. Temperature varies due to seasons, altitude, and also diurnally, especially in desert areas. Temperature determines the rate of transpiration in plants and the rate of water loss in animals. While a majority of organisms only survive within a narrow range of temperature, some are adapted to extreme conditions. Camels and desert plants are adapted to hot conditions, while the polar bear is adapted to extremely cold areas. The soil is a huge reservoir for nutrients and home for plants and fungi and other microorganisms. Soil quality is determined by texture, nutrient content, and water holding capacity. Fertile soils with good water holding capacity encourages the growth of land plants, while waterlogged soils are inhabited by aquatic plants and anaerobic microorganisms. Desert plants thrive in dry, sandy soils. Humidity is the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. It affects the rate at which water evaporates from the surfaces of organisms. High humidity reduces the rate of transpiration and sweating. Wind is air in motion. It increases the rate of water loss from bodies of organisms, especially transpiration in plants. Wind also plays an important role in pollination and seed dispersal. In aquatic habitats, wind causes waves in lakes and oceans, which enhance aeration of water. Winds blowing from water bodies causes formation of rain on land. Now we look at biotic interrelationships. Now, most species populations within an ecosystem have interacted with one another over a long period of time. The interactions that occur within a community fall into three major categories: competition, predation, and symbiosis. Competition is a kind of interaction in which organisms compete for limited resources. This may be intraspecific or interspecific. Intraspecific competition occurs between members of the same species. In animals, this may be competition for food, water, and mates. In plants, it's usually nutrients, water, light, and space. Interspecific competition occurs between members of different species. When two different organisms compete for the same resource, the most aggressive one will survive, while the other has three options: change its niche, migrate out, or die. Two organisms occupying different niches can exist without competition. Predation is a kind of interaction in which one organism kills another for food. The hunter animal is called the predator and the hunted is called the prey. Both have different adaptations. Predators such as cobras inject poison into the prey. They can kill them outright or paralyze them. Lions and other predators have a binocular vision, meaning that their eyes are in front of their heads. This makes it easier for them to judge the distance of the animal they are hunting. Prey animals are also adapted to escape from the predators. They have eyes on the sides of their heads, which gives them a wider view of the surrounding so that they can spot the predator before it attacks them. Some animals also camouflage with the surrounding to avoid being noticed by the predator. But the predator can also camouflage with the surrounding to avoid being noticed by the prey. Symbiosis is a kind of interaction between organisms of different species in which the two coexist for the benefit of one or both of them. The two organisms are called symbionts. Symbiosis falls into three categories: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Mutualism is a kind of symbiotic association in which both organisms benefit. In animals, for example, we can take this giraffe and this bird. The birds feed on the parasites on the animal's body. In the process, the animal gets cleaned and the birds obtain food. Mutualism is also seen in lichens, which is an association between algae and fungi. In this association, the algae is photosynthetic and makes food for itself and the fungi. On its part, the fungi provides shelter and protection as well as absorb water and minerals for itself and for the algae. Commensalism is an association in which one organism benefits while the other neither benefits nor is it harmed. A good example of commensalism in plants is seen in this orchid growing on this branch of a mango tree. Although the orchid benefits by getting protection, the mango tree neither benefits nor is it harmed. In animals, commensalism is seen between sea anemone and clownfish. Although the sea anemone has stinging tentacles, the fish finds it a comfortable place to live as it receives protection from predators. Parasitism is an association in which one species, called the parasite, derives nutrients by living in or on the body of another organism called the host. Parasites, like worms, live in the bodies of their hosts and are called endoparasites. Fleas and lice live on the bodies of their hosts and are called ectoparasites. Parasitism in plants is seen in cuscuta, which attaches itself to the host plant stem and draws nutrients. This association is often disadvantageous to the host because it's often deprived of nutrients, suffers physical harm, and in some cases, the parasite may be a disease vector. Next is the nitrogen cycle. Now, this is the cycling of nitrogen and its compounds between plants, animals, soil, and the atmosphere. It occurs as free atmospheric nitrogen, constituting 78% of the atmospheric gases. Nitrogen is a major component of the plant and animals' proteins. Living organisms cannot, however, utilize nitrogen in its free gaseous form. It is therefore necessary that atmospheric nitrogen is converted in a form that can be utilized by plants. This is called nitrogen fixation. It can occur in two ways: biologically and non-biologically. Non-biologically, Lightning breaks the nitrogen-nitrogen covalent bond, forming free nitrogen atoms, which quickly combine with atmospheric oxygen and water to form nitrous and nitric acids. These are then converted to nitrates by plants. Biologically, nitrogen fixation is done by nitrogen-fixing microorganisms. These include the rhizobium bacteria in the root nodules of legumes, which convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia, which can be used by plants. It can also be fixed by free-living bacteria such as Azotobacter and Clostridium, and some algae like nostoc. All these organisms fix nitrogen into ammonia. 10. Nitrifying bacteria such as Nitrobacter convert the ammonia into nitrates. The nitrates are absorbed by plants for utilization. Animals obtain nitrogen by feeding on plants and use it to make animal proteins. When the animals excrete or die, they are decomposed by bacteria and fungi to form ammonia. This ammonia is then converted to nitrates by nitrifying bacteria, so nitrogen returns to the soil this way. Some soil microorganisms reduce nitrates into nitrites, ammonia, and even nitrogen gas, which are not useful to plants. This process is called denitrification and returns nitrogen into the atmosphere. Here is a schematic diagram illustrating the nitrogen cycle. Now we look at energy flow in an ecosystem. In any ecosystem, energy flow begins with the sun, which is the primary source of energy. Plants absorb specific light wavelengths and utilize it for photosynthesis. The solar energy tapped by plants, called primary producers, is converted to chemical energy and passed to all other organisms. So plants make their own food. Some animals eat plants, and some other animals eat animals that eat plants. So all are directly or indirectly dependent on plants. So there is a unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to the plants and then to the animals. This illustration is called a food chain. The plants are called producers. The species who eat plants are called primary consumers, and species who eat primary consumers are called secondary consumers. Each of these feeding level is called a trophic level. But there is one other component of the food chain. These are fungi and bacteria. When plants and animals die, these fungi and bacteria decompose their bodies. They become nutrients which are again used by plants. These fungi and bacteria are called decomposers. This is another example of a food chain. The rat eats fruits which come from plants. Snake eats rat, and eagle eats snake. Eagle dies and is decomposed by fungi to release nutrients for the plant. These kind of food chains, which have one producer, one primary consumer, and one decomposer, are called simple food chains. But life is not that simple. If you look at this food web, it is made up of several interconnected food chains. But even on this food web, it is still easy to point the various trophic levels. Therefore, we say that energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next. So, does a giraffe get all the energy from plants which the plants got from the sun? Or does the lion get all the energy from the giraffe, which the giraffe got from the plant, which the plant got from the sun? No. All ecosystems abide by the first and second laws of thermodynamics because energy is being converted from one form to another as it is being transferred from the sun to various organisms. In addition, the biosphere is continuously losing some energy in form of heat. In fact, about 90% of energy is lost at each trophic level. So the energy transferred becomes lesser and lesser as we go to higher trophic levels. And now, ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramids are diagrams used to show relationships between organisms in an ecosystem. They are made of sets of bars stacked on top of each other. They can show the number of organisms or biomass at each trophic level. They visually describe the quantities we see in food chains and food webs. The bottom of the pyramid represents the primary producers, the first trophic level. On top of that is the primary consumers, the second trophic level. Then secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, until you reach the highest trophic level in that ecosystem. In an ecosystem, the energy is being transferred up the pyramid as each organism is consumed by the organism in the next trophic level. The height of the bar is the same, but the width is proportional to the quantity being displayed. For an ecological pyramid of numbers, the width shows the number of organisms. While in the pyramid of biomass, the width shows the biomass of the organisms. The unit for this is grams per meter squared. This is a pyramid of numbers which doesn't take into account the size of the organisms. So we have grass, which is eaten by rabbits, who are then eaten by foxes, who are finally eaten by eagles. As you can see, 1,000 species of grass are eaten by lots of rabbits. That then feeds very few foxes. These foxes will then feed a large number of eagles. Pyramids of numbers can end up looking inverted. For instance, if one single producer could feed thousands of primary consumers, like in this tree, which feeds lots of caterpillars. Pyramids of biomass are almost always large at the bottom and get smaller going up. And this is because rather than showing the number of organisms, they show the total mass in that trophic level. For instance, one caterpillar weighs about 3 grams, and one tree weighs about 30 tons, which is 30 million grams. So that is about 10 million caterpillars, equal to the mass of one tree. So the tree bar will be wider than that of caterpillars, even though there are more caterpillars on that tree. Now population. We said that population is the number of organisms of a particular species in a given habitat. Population density refers to the number of organisms per unit area. Dispersion is the distribution of organisms in a given habitat. Growth is the rate of increase in number. Population can be estimated in several ways, including quadrat, line transect, and capture-recapture methods. In this video, we shall do the capture-recapture method. So in this experiment, we shall estimate the population of the brown garden snails or the Helix aspersa using the capture-recapture method. So let's say this is our first capture. We have a total of 13 snails. We mark them. We choose a black mark And remember, this mark should not harm the organism or make it conspicuous and vulnerable to predators. And then we release the 13 snails to freely interact with others in their habitat. We give them about 5 to 7 days to mingle in their habitat. And then we return and recapture another sample, not necessarily 13. So this time we count the total number. We mark all of them red. And so we have a total of 30 snails in the second capture. Out of these, 3 snails bear the black mark. They had been captured in the first capture. Then we calculate the population using the formula P is equal to FC times SC over MR, where FC is the first count, in our case it was 13. SC is the second capture, in our case it was 30. And MR is the marked recaptured. In this case, 3 snails were recaptured. And so population is equal to 13 times 30 over 3, which gives us 130 snails. Next, we look at adaptations of plants to various habitats. An adaptation is a physiological and structural modification in an organism that increases its chances of survival in a specific environment. Plants possess different adaptations based on their habitat. There are 4 main groups of plants. Xerophytes are plants that grow in hot and dry areas. Mesophytes are plants growing under normal conditions of water supply or in well-watered soils. Hydrophytes are plants growing in aquatic environments. Halophytes are plants growing in salty environments. Xerophytes are adapted to withstand a dry habitat or to endure conditions of prolonged drought like in arid and semi-arid areas. These areas have unpredictable and poorly distributed rainfall, very high day and very low night temperatures. They are windy and with very low humidity. And so the idea in their adaptation is to reduce the rate of water loss and conserve as much water as possible. Their leaves are reduced in size or modified to spines like in cactus. This reduces the surface area over which transpiration takes place. The leaves may be folded to avoid exposing stomata to environmental factors, and in some cases, the leaves may be shed off during drought to reduce surface exposed to transpiration. They have a thick, waxy cuticle to minimize the rate of cuticular transpiration. Most of them have reduced number of stomata, and even when present, some of the stomata are sunken, which accumulates moisture in the substomatal air spaces, leading to low diffusion gradient and thus reducing transpiration rate. In some cases, xerophytes have reversed stomatal rhythm, which means they open the stomata at night and close them during the day. Some of them, like cactus, store water in large parenchyma cells contained in succulent stems and leaves. They also have extensive root systems, which increase the surface for absorption of water. Hydrophytes grow in waterlogged areas or even submerged in water. Most emergent and floating types have broad leaves with maximum number of stomata on the upper surface. This provides a large surface area for gaseous exchange and for water loss. Hydrophytes have large air-filled tissues called parenchyma that reduces the density, giving buoyancy to the plants and also assist in gaseous exchange. They have poorly developed roots and lack root hairs to reduce absorption of water. Their flowers are raised above water to allow for pollination. And finally, pollution. Now, pollution is the addition of undesirable substances into the environment and thus reducing the quality of land, air, and water. Pollution is caused by human activities and can be attributed to industrialization and the ever-growing human population. Industrialization has led to discharge of harmful waste materials in the air, water, and on land, which has devastating effects on living organisms. Due to the increasing human population, we have witnessed massive clearing of once natural forests and vegetation to create room for human settlement and increase the available agricultural land to meet the increasing food demand. Water pollution. As of 2012, it was estimated that only 1% of the world's fresh water is fit for human consumption. Rapid urbanization and industrialization has led to most water bodies being contaminated with a variety of pollutants. Water pollutants can be broadly classified as domestic sewage, industrial effluents, and agrochemical discharge. Domestic sewage is the wastewater drained from houses in a town or a city. This sewage contains about 99% water and 0.1 impurities such as suspended soil, colloidal and dissolved materials. Infectious microorganisms also form part of this sewage discharged from homes and hospitals into the water. Industries such as paper manufacturing, petroleum, sugar and textile mills release tons of wastewater that contains toxic metals such as lead, mercury and copper, along with detergents, alcohol and acids into water bodies. In agriculture, farmers were in the past advised to use fertilizers, pesticides and fungicides to improve crop yield and control pests and diseases. This effectively leads to chemical contamination of the soil. When rainwater flows through these soils, the runoff carries these agrochemicals into water bodies, causing water pollution. Leaching of these chemicals also contaminate the groundwater. Discharge of contaminated water into water bodies has adverse effects on aquatic life. It can kill or reduce the number of aquatic inhabitants due to direct poisoning or reduced oxygen concentration. Large amounts of nutrients such as ammonia, nitrates, nitrites and phosphates cause eutrophication as seen in algal bloom. This algal bloom cause a bad color and smell in water. It also reduces the amount of oxygen dissolved and hence causing death of aquatic organisms. Besides these, we also see plants such as water cabbage and water hyacinth growing in water bodies and choking the marine life. Pathogenic microorganisms also cause outbreaks of human diseases such as cholera and typhoid fever. Heavy metals, when ingested, also cause serious health concerns to humans and animals. It also leads to biomagnification, which is the increasing concentration of a toxicant at successive trophic levels like DDT in aquatic food chains. High concentrations of DDT disturbs calcium metabolism in birds, which causes thinning of eggshells and their premature breaking. Water pollution can be controlled by treating wastewater before discharging into water bodies, as well as controlled use of agrochemicals and fertilizers. Next is land pollution. Land pollution occurs mainly due to solid waste and agricultural activities. Solid waste include paper, plastics, glass, metals, rubber, leather, textiles, and leftover foods. Solid waste is also generated by offices, schools, and hospitals. This waste is collected by authorities and dumped far away. This open dumping not only reduces the beauty of the land, but also becomes a breeding ground for rodents and disease-causing vectors, particularly because a large part of it is non-biodegradable. In some places, open dumping has been replaced with sanitary landfills, in which waste is compacted and dumped in a depression or trench. And even then, the landfills get filled faster than expected. And the leaching of harmful chemicals also contaminate groundwater. Human activities such as overcultivation, poor irrigation, unrestricted grazing, and deforestation resulted in land degradation, eventually leading to desertification. Clearing forests for agriculture and settlement are also to blame. In many places, farmers cut down trees, burn the remains, and cultivate crops on the ash-rich soil. Once they are done, they move to another part of the forest. In addition, agricultural lands are under pressure due to increasing population. The loss of forest cover leaves soil exposed to erosion. Use of agrochemicals also pollute the soil and causes loss in soil fertility. Another solid waste that requires special attention is electronic waste from irreparable electronic goods. Soil pollution in agricultural activities can be reduced by adopting organic farming and reducing the use of non-biodegradable synthetic agrochemicals. How about solid waste? The best way is to segregate it into three categories: recyclable, biodegradable, and non-biodegradable. Recyclable or reusable waste such as glass bottles, plastics, and paper can be given to rag pickers, while biodegradable waste such as food remains can be put in a composting pit in gardens. Non-biodegradable waste such as plastics should be handled carefully, as it has been the major contributor to environmental pollution. A number of countries have banned the use of plastic bags and have encouraged the use of eco-friendly bags. And finally, air pollution. Now, the air we breathe has become so highly polluted over the last century due to air pollutants, which have detrimental health effects on all living organisms. In addition to health effects, air pollution can significantly impair vision. Air pollution comes from human activities such as burning fuels in automobiles and industries. It also comes from burning wood, dust from construction activities, agriculture, and decomposing waste. Natural sources of air pollution include dust from sandstorms, volcanic activities, wildfires, and methane gas emitted from animals such as cattle. Common air pollutants include ground-level ozone, particulate matter, carbon oxides, sulfur oxides, and nitrogen oxides. Particulate matter is a mixture of sulfates, nitrates, ammonia, sodium chloride, carbon, mineral dust, and water. It consists of a complex mixture of solid and liquid particles of organic and inorganic substances suspended in air. They differ in their sizes. Small particles are the most dangerous because once inhaled, they may reach the lungs and can interfere with gaseous exchange. Chronic or prolonged exposure of solid particles can contribute to the risk of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, typically asthma as well as lung cancer. Ozone absorbs harmful UV radiations from the sun in the upper atmosphere and can help prevent the increased risk of skin cancer. However, ground-level ozone causes problems. It does so by a chemical reaction which is triggered by absorption of light. The reaction between nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds leads to formation of a photochemical smog and ground ozone. This is seen mostly in summer and can appear as an orange-brown hail over the city. This smog in the ground ozone causes breathing problems, can trigger asthma attacks, and lead to lung diseases. Nitrogen oxide emissions come from cars and factories where fuels are combusted. We know that oxygen forms about 21% of our atmosphere, while nitrogen forms around 79%. In a car engine, a tiny amount of nitrogen combines with oxygen to form mixtures of nitrogen oxides. Studies have shown that there is a close relationship between the signs of bronchitis in asthmatic children and the long-term exposure to these pollutants. Sulfur oxide is formed when sulfur-containing compounds are combusted in the presence of oxygen, mainly coming from fossil fuels which contain traces of sulfur, and also smelting of mineral ores leads to formation of sulfur oxide. In turn, these pollutants affect the respiratory system and cause eye irritation. If you inhale them, you are likely to develop a cough, secrete more mucus, and will be at a higher risk of developing chronic bronchitis. In summary, all these are causing unnecessary deaths, especially where the emission of these pollutants can be avoided, like the use of catalytic converters in cars and by scrubbing of power station gases. Another hazardous waste is radioactive waste. Although some radioisotopes such as radium-226 and uranium-235 occur naturally, others like cobalt-60, krypton-85, and strontium-90 are formed as fission products in nuclear reactors and atomic bomb fallouts. Nuclear energy can be used in a non-polluting way to generate electricity. However, two problems still remain: accidental leakage and safe disposal of the radioactive waste. For instance, in the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster in Ukraine, one of the reactors of the plant underwent a catastrophic increase in power, leading to an explosion. Such explosions lead to a large amount of radioactive substances being released into the air. Exposure to radiations can cause serious health issues, including mutations and cancer. Nuclear waste must therefore be handled with extreme care. it is recommended that the waste be buried at least 500 meters below the Earth's surface after it has been shielded and stored in sealed containers.